Hi, welcome to this video, which is a time lapse of my attempt at doing an expressionist painting. This isn't a natural style to me, so it was quite challenging, but it was fun to do. So what you'll see is common with this style is that there's strong, bright colors. There's going to be defined brush strokes with not a lot of smooth blending, rough texture, layers, lots of layers, and undefined edges on your overall form. So your portrait, your eyes, mouth, all of that will be quite undefined. So you need to start with preparing your background. So this can be a coat of gesso and then layering that with a background color. It doesn't matter what background color it is. It can be totally up to you. It can also just be a straight gray if you want. You then need to start placing in your facial features, and I've just done this with a black and a fine brush just to get the main ideas in, and then using a larger flat brush to actually add in where my darker values are or my shadows in my facial features. This just gives it a bit of depth in those areas. Then just using a large flat brush and a paint palette, as you can see here, to start building up my layers of color. So I'm working from my darkest values. And I'm using purples, and I'm just adding a little bit of white into some areas and some pink just to bring a bit of depth of color in there. And I'm going to continue just building up these layers, going through from my dark values to my mid values. Here I'm adding some blues in, and then I'll be adding in my lighter values as I get towards the end. It's up to you when you define your eyes. It is actually something that I normally do first up, but this time I chose to do it about the middle of the way through. And as you will see when you're watching, while we're watching this, I actually had a lot of trouble with the eyes. I actually think I did the eyes about 3 or 4 times as I got quite frustrated with them. So you can see here now I'm starting with the reds and the oranges, so I'm bringing in my brighter mid-tone colors as well. So really just continue to watch. That's what this is about. It's about that adding layers on layers and the nice strong brush strokes, and just continuing to define edges of shapes with value. And you'll see towards the end that I've also then gone back into the background a few times. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll come back in later. Okay, so we're about halfway through here, and you can see I'm up to my lightest tones here. I've started to define my highlights in my face, starting to define highlights and areas in my shoulders and my clothing. And I've also worked into the background a bit as well. Still working on those eyes, and you can see I keep changing them as we go through. What I noticed that I wasn't doing is I actually wasn't taking enough notice of my photograph. And so that's something you really need to ensure that you're doing. Take notice of your reference photo. I can see here now that the eye is actually too low, and you can see here that I just went over them and started again with the eyes because they were just in the wrong positions altogether. So don't be afraid to, cover something up and repaint in another layer. That's what this is about. Keep just working into it. You do need to make sure that you let areas dry between those layers. That's the only thing. So it was shortly after this that I actually got to a point where I was quite frustrated with the painting. I'd been working on it for probably about an hour at this point, and things just weren't working for me. The eyes were frustrating me. My colours were getting muddy, and you can start to see that on the highlights of the face. So I actually literally need to walk away and leave it overnight and not look at it and come back at it the next morning. Next morning, when I looked at it with fresh eyes, I was able to work back into it again, and I realised that the position of those eyes were incorrect. And so I'm just working back over those eyes to now position them a little bit better on the face as well. So sometimes taking that break, stepping away from it, and re-looking at your work is really beneficial. So we can see now that the face is really starting to get a bit of definition and shape to it as well. And I can start to work more in the background. I haven't really done much with the hair at this point. The hair is going to be the last thing that I work on because it kind of goes over the top of the background, over top of parts of the face as well. So although I do have the shape of the hair in there, I'll really define that towards the end. But with the facial features now, there's a lot more definition there. We can see the eyes there, still not quite right at this point in time. They're a little bit uneven, so I will have to work on that down the track as well. But it's starting to look a bit more like me. I've reworked into the lips and the cheeks and that areas as well. So you can see I'm going in with the hair now, and I'm just brushing with thick brush strokes the colours in there and letting the colours naturally blend through as they go through, and still bringing in some of those highlights. So I'm constantly reworking and evaluating where some highlights need to be, where do I need to add more color, where do I need to add more shadows and things like that. So for me, I'm about texture in my painting. So I'm coming back in with a palette knife here, and I'm literally scraping on some color as well. So the red and some of the white and yellow, I'm scraping into areas just to add texture and depth within those places as well. So you can do this with a palette knife, or you can lay it on more thickly with a dry brush. Will also do the same job. Don't worry about, if you get drips or spills or anything like that. That's part of this process as well. I'm just going in now and defining those last few bits around the eye and adding some large highlights on it as I'm coming up towards what I'm feeling to be the end of it at this point in time. But once again, what I'll do is I will leave this and I will work back into it again after I've stopped looking at it for an hour. So I'm walking away here. I'm okay with it at this point. But when I've come back to it the next morning again, those eyes weren't correctly placed for me. So you can see in the bottom of this picture that I've really worked back into those eyes. I've defined the earrings. I've reworked into the background as well and smoothed that out a bit, and just actually shaped my hair down a little bit, and have actually taken down some of the highlights around the cheeks and things like that. I still think that there's some areas to work on, but I can live with it, and that's what it's about. Get it to a point that you can live with. Here's some other examples of some expressionist portraits in different styles, and you can work across a number of different styles that suit you and the way that they're applied. Look at examples, refer to examples when you're painting your own style, and see what works for you.